The wind howled all afternoon. We're on chapter 3. And when I looked out the window, I couldn't see the barn. Cassie drew pictures by the wood stove, and Sarah read, stopping every once in a while to add vegetables to the soup. No sign of John. Should I go upstairs and check on him? I asked Sarah. No, Caleb, let him be. You could feed the animals, though. I put on my coat and gloves. Remember the rope, Caleb, said Sarah, peering out the window. You can't see a foot in front of you. I'll remember. And your hat, Caleb. Sarah! Sarah laughed and opened the door for me, and I went out into the wind and snow. There were already drifts, and I took a hold of the rope, following it all the way across the yard, stumbling in the snow. The noise of the wind was so loud that I was surprised by the quiet of the barn when I stepped inside. I stood in the middle of the barn and looked all around. Papa had once said that the barn in winter was the most peaceful place he knew. It is a small, peaceful place in the middle of a big land, he had told me. It was true. No voices, only the animals, their breath and bodies so warm. I fed John's horse, stroking his nose. Where did you come from? He stared at me, his eyes dark. And who is he? There was only silence in the barn. Papa was right. The barn, so small in a big place. Peace. John is awake, announced Cassie when I returned to the house. I can see. John sat at the table drinking tea. Seal sat at his feet. Min was now sleeping in Seal's basket. You look better, said Sarah. I am better, said John. Cassie studied John closely. Finally, he put down his cup of tea. What? He said gruffly. Are you a robber? Asked Cassie. Cassie, warned Sarah. No, John said. I am not a robber. Sarah carried an armful of laundry upstairs. I opened my book. I'm writing about you, I told John. John frowned. There's nothing to write about me, he said. But I've already written some things. I pushed the book over for him to read. John's lips were set in a thin line. He didn't even look at my book. He turned to Cassie, who had been staring at him all this time. Doesn't she do anything? He asked me. I smiled. She's little. She doesn't do much. She draws. She plays hide and seek. Hide and seek! Good idea. Go hide, he said to Cassie. Cassie waited. You have to count, I said. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slower, I told him. John sighed. 5, 6. Cassie ran off. John leaned back, looking pleased. There, he said. She's gone. He lifted his cup of tea. Ready, called Cassie from somewhere in the house. Now you have to find her, I said. You go find her. I'm coming, I called. Not you, came Cassie's voice. Him. John stared at his teacup. Then, muttering under his breath, he got up and left the room. I'm coming, he called. I'm coming, he repeated softly. I looked at my open book. I wrote. He didn't even look at it. Why wouldn't he look at what I wrote? Maybe he's afraid. But what is he afraid of? We ate with the oil lamp, throwing light across the table. Grace, Cassie, said Sarah. John stopped, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Cassie waited for him to put it down. God is great, God is good, and we thank him for our food, said Cassie. Food, corrected Sarah. Food, repeated Cassie. John ate quietly, not looking at anyone, especially Cassie. John didn't look at Cassie as if he knew what I knew. When you look at Cassie, she asks a question. Always. This didn't work for John. Do you have children? Asked Cassie. Don't pry, Cassie, said Sarah. What does pry mean? Asked Cassie. It means not poking into the life of someone who doesn't want it, said John briskly. But I want to know, said Cassie matter-of-factly. What I want is for you to eat your dinner, Sarah said sternly. I smiled. Cassie makes me think of you, Sarah. When you first came here, you asked a lot of questions. Sarah smiled too. I did, didn't I? And your father grew very tired of it. I came here from Maine, she told John. After Jacob's wife died, Jacob wrote an advertisement in the newspaper for a wife. I read it. I came. And she stayed, I told John. Anna and I were afraid she wouldn't. She missed the sea, but she stayed. That was a brave thing to do. said John. I thought so too, said Sarah. It seems a long time ago now. She brought Seal, said Cassie. Now I'm here. I'll say, said John. Sarah got up and went to the window. I'm sure Jacob won't be home tonight. He'll stay in town. You can talk to him tomorrow, John. John didn't answer. He took a medicine bottle out of his pocket when Sarah wasn't looking and took a pill. When he saw me watching, he quickly put the bottle back in his pocket. There was no more talk, no more questions. The wind howls outside, the snow and sleet hitting the windows like stones tossed there. Inside it is peaceful, but John doesn't look peaceful at all. He looks like he has secrets. I will find out what they are. Chapter 4. The morning was bright and clear. When I woke, no snow or wind. I could smell coffee. John's room was empty. The bed was made, his small carrying pack by the window. I looked into Cassie's room, and she was still asleep, one arm thrown back, her hair in a tangle. Downstairs, the coffee pot was hot to the touch. Through the window, I could see John gathering wood from the shed. Nick watched, and Lottie leaped through the drifts and barked. John tossed a small piece of wood, and Nick picked it up. They began walking back to the house. Caleb, did you make this coffee? Sarah was in her robe, a cup in her hand. I shook my head. It must have been John, I said. The door opened, and John came in with the dogs. This is wonderful coffee, said Sarah. John nodded. I've had years of coffee making, he said, dumping wood into the bin. That's Caleb's job, bringing in wood, said Sarah. Caleb took care of my horse yesterday, said John. He sat down suddenly, his face paled. Sarah looked alarmed. Are you sure you're well enough for this? She asked. I wonder if John would tell Sarah about the pills he had in his pocket, but he didn't. John got up and poured coffee for himself. I'm well enough, he said quickly. The animals, Caleb, they need to be fed, said Sarah. John held up his hand. No, Caleb, I've already done that. Thank you, John, said Sarah. I like this work, said John. I used to farm a long time ago. Did you? Asked Sarah. You know, I never asked you where you lived, where your home is. John took a long drink of coffee. He didn't answer. He looked over Sarah's head at Cassie on the stairs. Ah, the queen, he said. Cassie came over and sat on Sarah's lap. The queen of what? Asked Cassie. Questions, said John. The queen of questions. Cassie smiled. She liked that. The dog sat up suddenly, listening. Lottie ran over to the door, and Nick followed her, barking. Hush, said Sarah, putting Cassie down. She went to the window. There's Jacob, he said, her face bright. He's early. Sarah opened the front door, and cold air rushed into the warm kitchen. Papa came in and put his arms around Sarah. I'm glad you're home, said Sarah, her face in Papa's neck. I'm glad too, said Jacob. Very slowly John stood. Papa, cried Cassie. There's my girl, said Papa. He picked her up and came into the kitchen. Hello, Caleb. Is there school, Papa? Was anyone there when you went by? I asked. No horses. I don't think there's school today, said Papa. The snow has drifted pretty deep in places. Jacob, you have a visitor, said Sarah. He came to see you yesterday. Oh? Papa looked at John. Do I know you? You and I knew each other a long time ago, Jacob, said John. Papa bent his head to one side thoughtfully. Then, as if he couldn't find any other word, John repeated softly, a long time ago. Suddenly, Papa stepped backwards as if he had been hit. He put Cassie down. Jacob, asked Sarah, what's wrong? Papa stared at John. Everyone was quiet, even Cassie. When Papa did speak, his voice was so soft I could hardly hear him. How can it be? Papa's voice broke. Jacob, who is this? Asked Sarah, stepping closer to Jacob as if to protect him from something. What? Cassie moved closer to me and I took her hand. Then Papa saw us. Caleb, take Cassie upstairs, he said sharply. Do you mean now? I asked. I was not used to his sharp tone. Yes, Caleb, please get Cassie dressed, said Sarah more softly. Come, Cassie, I said. But Caleb, Cassie began. Hush, I said. Cassie and I went to the stairway, where we were out of sight, but Papa's voice stopped us, and we sat on the steps listening. You were dead. dead. Papa's voice sounded ragged, as if it hurt to talk. Startled, Seal ran past us up the stairs. Is that what she told you? John asked softly. Jacob, who is this? Asked Sarah. There was a moment of silence. This is my father. This is John Whitting, said Papa, his voice growing louder. But you told me he was dead, said Sarah. I could hear the confusion in her voice. That's what I thought. Cassie tugged at my sleeve. Who is he, Caleb? She whispered. He is Papa's father, our grandfather, I whispered back to her. Grandfather? Whispered Cassie slowly, as if trying out a word she'd never used. My heart began to beat so fast in my chest that I could hardly breathe. Grandfather. Then I heard the front door slam, Papa leaving. It opened and closed again, Sarah going after him. Then silence. I heard John walk across the kitchen and pull out a chair and sit down. Very faintly, I heard the rattle of the pill bottle. My grandfather was taking a pill. My grandfather.